time productively and get into a proper interview.
Okay, you can see who's the boss already, can't you, Greta?
Our dear leader.
That's why you're running a political
Sorry,
party.
our glorious leader.
Okay, well, apparently it's recording, so we'll start from there. It's lovely to see you both, and thank you for taking the time.
Richard?
Yes.
You're breaking up.
You are breaking up a little bit.
Hell, damn, it's my internet's so slow.
Can we record too, just in case?
Yeah, we will give us permission to record. So go to participants, click our name, and it should say allow to record.
There, done.
Okay, we are also recording.
Okay. Well, I live in rural South Devon, so I've got an old-fashioned piece of string instead of fiber optic broadband, and the vibrations take a long time to get through the trees. I'm also on a very old computer. I want to start by looking at some background stuff, some past stuff, then talk about what you're both doing now, and then look at where you might want to go in the future and where you think the future of men's issues might be going. And I'd like to start with Greta. I mean, you're obviously not from London. You've come here from
You're
Hungary.
not from around here.
Yeah, right. So you've come from Hungary. What brought that about?
Well, I moved to London to go to university originally, and I studied biological sciences. Then I did a social science degree, science, technology, and society, a master's.
Aha.
Then I also lived in the US for a year, and then I ended up missing London, so I came back and.
Okay. So what about London did you miss?
It's just one of those things when you need to kind of distance yourself from your present situation in order to appreciate what you already have. It was all about appreciating the little things, my friends, familiarity with places, and also I just like the fact that I can fly to so many countries in like a couple of hours.
Right.
And I like Europe. I like the idea of being close to continental Europe, and there's just something about European culture that just makes me feel at home.
Okay, cool. And Elizabeth, you're not from London either, are you?
I am not from London.
Yeah, go tell me more. You sound like you're from Liverpool, somewhere around there.
I am from Liverpool, the birthplace of the Beatles, as I tell our American friends. And, you know, I come from I have working class blood, which I think has been very good for me. My mother, when I was a little baby, went to university with my grandmother, actually. And she regressed into an ideological idiot, and so I was raised from a young age to be an ideological idiot, but I think my working class blood pulled through and allowed me to see the obvious truth of what's going on when it was presented to me. And you know, I have missed Liverpool since I've been in London. I moved here when I was 17 and was pregnant with a local by 19, and that forced me to stay here, you know, whereas I was really homesick, maybe age 20, 21. But then, then the last general election happened, and Liverpool was one of the few places to remain Labour, and a hashtag sprung up on Twitter that was something like Liverpudlian, no, Scouse not British, or something like that. and they were all talking about how working class people in all these mining towns that had voted Labour for years and then gone Tory in the last general election should be ashamed of themselves, and they've failed their working class roots and they can go fuck themselves and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, you know what, I'm really glad I'm not in Liverpool anymore.
Okay, so you've both found.
Also,
all right, there's more.
Can I just say there is more? I also hate Liverpool now because it looks like Manchester. When I left Liverpool, it was like this grotty, fantastic place full of dive bars that had served 15-year-olds and homeless people. And now I go back and it's like the Starbucks is over there and the Pret a Manger is over there and All Saints is over there. And there's nothing that you can latch onto as part of Liverpool. So fuck Liverpool. Oh my God. I'm going to get so much hate for this.
I'll edit it out my end. You can do what you like with your end. So you've both made your homes in London. Greta, you said you started off in biological sciences.
Yes.
And then went into social sciences.
Unfortunately.
Well, that leads into the question: how did that feel after, pretty hard science, database science, to? I mean, my background is engineering and then social science, so I found there quite a contrast.
What social science did you do?
Psychology and sociology.
Yeah, my master's had a large sociology element, also some philosophy. Well, I was quite naive at the time because of my science background, because when I did my undergrad, I mean, politics didn't really happen. It just didn't matter. We studied cells and organisms and all that, and the laws of thermodynamics and organic chemistry. I mean, whatever your personal opinions were just didn't matter whatsoever. And I knew I didn't want to work in a lab. I wanted to be a science journalist. And then I found this master's. I kind of like the idea of looking at the larger picture around the interactions between science and society and culture. So, the packaging kind of seemed right. I saw that there would be opportunity to study science communication as part of it, some philosophy. And I wasn't really aware of the ideological bias at universities at the time. And obviously I became aware once I started my master's, and I did it part-time, so I was there for 2 years. And it was kind of an interesting experience for me because I had always considered myself kind of left-wing. I was brought up in a very left-wing environment. And when I started my master's, what was really strange to me is that everyone just agreed with each other. At first, I liked it because I'm quite an introverted person. I kind of find it easy to get along with people. So at first, it felt comfortable. But then after a few months, I just started to think, well, I'm here to learn. At the end of the day. Like, I'm here to have myself challenged. And it just didn't really happen. And then I wrote my master's dissertation on the 2016 US elections, on the treatment of scientific facts by candidates. And that was the real eye-opening experience. So I was talking to the supervisor. I started writing it during the primaries, so Trump hadn't been nominated yet. And I had already kind of predicted that he's going to be nominated and he has a very good chance of winning the election. And then my supervisor said to me that, well, they're going to nominate someone like Marco Rubio, and then I told him that, well, I've been watching all kinds of media outlets. I've actually been watching some Fox News for the first time in my life. So I hear all kinds of points of view and it's not so obvious to me. And then he just said, his response was, well, you shouldn't watch Fox News. So there was kind of an awakening for me, and I didn't get very good marks on my assignments. And the feminist bias was obvious from the start too. It just didn't feel, I just wasn't very aware of it immediately, but especially the students, actually it was during those 2 years when I first learned I was oppressed as a woman. I mean, growing up in Hungary, it had never been a topic of discussion, you know, that women couldn't achieve something, or I shouldn't aspire for certain goals or careers because I was a woman. It just never came up whatsoever. And then I did science. It didn't really matter either. And then, you know, at the age of 22, 23, I found out that I was oppressed and I needed to be saved because I was a victim and it just sounded ridiculous.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with social science. When I started, I was told The Guardian was the paper that we should all be taking notice of. And that happened again when I did my master's in writing, that, are we all read The Guardian here? And by that time, I'd already stopped reading The Guardian, because what fascinated me in the social science was, you know, the flip side of your experience was that I suddenly found out that I was an oppressor, and that people like me caused all the problems in the world, which was quite hard to take for 4 years. You know, I found the atmosphere not conducive to being male. It was definitely second-class citizen status in a lot of the courses. Not so much the more scientific ones, like, you know, cognitive psychology, where you look more at the mind as a computer, but the social psychology was led by feminism. And we had to do a whole module on feminism. And I was very interested in the way that men's lives were systematically misrepresented in order to make the feminist case. That's what I wanted to do my master's in, but my supervisor was a feminist. So that didn't fly, unfortunately. So how did, when you say you became aware of the feminist bias, how did that manifest? What kind of things alerted you?
Well, the first kind of alarm bell rang when during some interactions with my peers, and it was actually guys. It was a couple of guys who first told me that the representation of women in art. We just started talking about art and advertising over lunch for some reason, and they just started telling me how using the female body in those contexts is very demeaning and objectifying.
Oh my God. And I hope they never see my bedroom.
And I was modeling professionally for a few years. That's actually how I paid for my master's. So it was news to me that, you know, the depiction
they
of
were
women
exploiting you. Oh my God, how awful.
And then, I mean, some of the papers we had to read to do our coursework on definitely had a feminist bias too. It was all kind of subtle though. We had to read Foucault, which at that point I thought, you know, I must be, I mean, I just thought I shouldn't be here, you know, I must be really stupid, you know, it's my IQ is not even 80 because I didn't understand the word of it. But then later on I learned why that was.
And why was that?
So yeah, because it's not written, it's not meant to be understood. So.
It's deliberately obscure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that with academic sociology. They would, I mean, there's nothing wrong with inventing words and inventing terms, but when a whole book is written in that jargon, there's very little left that made any sense.
Yeah, and I love it that they talk about the working class. They love describing the struggle.
Yeah.
Of working class people, but they write in a language that's just so completely inaccessible to anyone outside academia.
Yeah.
I've always found it extremely.
Well, I came to university after 10 years in industry. I started my life building cranes. So I was very amused really by the intellectual description of what the working class were like. And the same with feminist descriptions of men. I sometimes wonder, have you actually met any men? You know, have you any idea what men's lives are actually like? Because I couldn't recognize myself in the feminist description. I couldn't recognize the factory I worked in the Marxist descriptions. They were almost caricatures, and I found that very difficult. So, Liz, did you study much? You're studying history, was it?
I was studying
Studying drinking, but
yeah. I decided to study history and politics because I realized that not having a degree was holding me back in the workplace.
Okay.
And the first year studying history was just the best. It was so intensely interesting and engaging, and there were little bits of kind of feminism creeping in, but nothing that was so egregious that I couldn't learn. And then the next year was the politics element of the course, and it was just pathetic. It was so biased in so many ways, and what really upset me was not the fact that without having studied this till now, I already knew better. It was the fact that people who agreed with this shit were not getting exposed to other ideas. And so it's no wonder that they then come out of university and go, well, I studied immigration for 3 months and I know this, that, and the other. And you're a bigot and you're prejudiced and racist and xenophobic and you cannot be listened to, so I got to like the very last month of the course, and then I had a conversation with some friends, and it suddenly occurred to me that I had chosen this of my own free will, and so I called the Open University and I said, look, this politics element's bullshit. I want to study pure history. And they said, okay. And so I was studying pure history and it was all good. And then COVID happened and my sons were at home all of the time and I couldn't work. So I've now deferred indefinitely.
Okay.
But, I think the Open University is interesting because on the one hand, it's just a miracle because people like me who have children and have other commitments can study, people who can't afford the time or money to go to a proper university can do it all at home. But the whole of the university system is just so infected with regressive ideas, and I think it's very sad. And actually I'm particularly annoyed at the moment. Have you seen the government response to COVID and universities?
Well, I've seen stuff in Scotland where they've got security guards keeping the students in.
Oh, no, not that. So they're worried that universities are not going to make enough money to survive.
Well, that's because they teach shit that no one needs.
So what they are doing is when a student applies to a university, because that's where they want to go, and a university accepts that student because they want to learn there, the government are going to step in and go, wait, this other university doesn't have enough people, so you're going there. So they're trying to save the university system. And as much as my heart breaks for everyone who would have to lose their jobs, because these things are not easy, I think that a lot of universities need to die, actually.
Yeah, I think there's a big thrashing going on.
It's not, they are not fulfilling their purpose as places to learn.
And it's becoming more evident, I guess, during a pandemic when people are forced to make more practical decisions.
Exactly.
They're not gonna go for lesbian dance therapy or whatever when they're gonna go for a degree that leads to a specific profession.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. There's a lot of luxury learning that's being cut now because the luxury is more difficult and people are making harder decisions. So you've done politics and history, and you've looked at politics and biology. How did you've mentioned that you started to realize there was a feminist bias? How did you both come into looking at men's issues?
Well, for me, it started, well, first of all, I've never considered myself a feminist, but it was during the Me Too movement that I started to consider myself an anti-feminist. And I started out by, I've been writing fiction and poetry pretty much all my life. I published a very anti-feminist poetry collection in 2017.
Okay.
And then I went on to write some articles for some websites. And it was earlier this year that I started a YouTube channel. And I started out by my first goal was to celebrate the differences between men and women. I wanted to kind of make use of my biology background and talk about hormones, brain differences, genetic differences, and things like that. And also making fun of ridiculous feminist claims in general. And then I just started to realize that, you know, it's fine to make fun of feminists and it's necessary, but maybe it's not enough to be an anti-feminist. And I just started to try to think of ways to have a more positive message, to be for something rather than just against something. And that's how I started looking into the men's rights movement. And I just found that I agreed with the vast majority of their claims and assertions. And I've met people like Elizabeth who have just clicked with and connected with really well. So it kind of makes sense to be involved.
So you started off by saying you never identified as a feminist.
No.
What was it that you didn't identify with? What was it that you said, that's not for me?
Well, first of all, growing up in Hungary, again, it just didn't really matter to me because I just felt like it was a pretty healthy, growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s, I just felt like it was quite a healthy dynamic between the sexes. Everyone kind of was free to act as they wanted to and express themselves and all this. So it never really came up. And then later on, in my late teens, I just started to kind of, then I fell in love with old Hollywood cinema. And stars like Elizabeth Taylor, Marilyn Monroe, Mae West. I was just so mesmerized by these women, and they just seemed so powerful to me. It just made no sense to me whatsoever that, you know, these women had, or my gender had ever been oppressed. It's just, I've instinctively felt that women were at least as powerful as men, just in a different way. And feminism, again, I only started to study feminism in a greater depth in my early 20s, but it just seemed to me that the only form of power they acknowledge is masculine power, and they want women to aspire to masculine roles, which is fine.
It's like money.
But if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But there's a whole other world of feminine power.
It grosses me out. It's like, it's such a narrow and like superficial definition of power. I can't stand it.
Yeah, I know. And that has never appealed to me because I've never felt like a victim. I've never felt oppressed. If anything, I think I've had a lot of privileges in life as a woman, because I don't think I would have been able to pay for my master's if I'd been a man. I mean, I could have stacked shelves at Tesco, but I don't think I would have made half the money I made, like modeling and working at events and doing promotional work and all that. So.
Okay, so it sounds like you encountered feminism, didn't like it much, didn't agree with it much, and that bounced you into looking at the men's movement.
Yeah.
What happened with you, Liz?
Oh, I wish my story was as non-shameful.
But you used to be a feminist.
Yeah, right? I have been a feminist.
That's
but
okay.
I mean, thank you. So I grew up as a fairly radical leftist, but what I was concerned about was pacifism and environmentalism.
Right.
You know, which I'm not ashamed of. I still care about not killing people and taking care of the planet. Although I have slightly less dogmatic ideas about how that's best achieved, how those things are best achieved. But with feminism, I became pregnant when I was 19, and I suddenly felt this overwhelming connection with all of motherkind. And I was watching David Attenborough and reading his books religiously, like finding out all of the stories of nature's mothers, which, you know, I don't regret in the slightest. It's very interesting. And I also just started identifying as a feminist because, you know, it's about sisterhood and equal rights, and, you know, that's lovely. And I started reading feminist literature, and I was agreeing with some and I wasn't agreeing with other bits, and I was thinking, well, that's all right, because there are, you know, an infinite number of feminisms. And then I started interacting with actual feminists, both online and in person, and I found out that actually there aren't an infinite number of feminisms. There's quite a limited number of feminisms. And if you don't hate men, which I didn't, because I have loved men in my life, you know, you get told to hand in your feminist card. And you know, I wouldn't hand in my feminist card. I was going to reform feminism. And then I started meeting men's rights activists and anti-feminists. And I have found family. I have found people with ethics who really want equality between the sexes. I have learned about all the issues and disadvantages and injustices that men and boys face that I was never aware of reading The Guardian as I did. And, you know, I've actually bizarrely found sisterhood.
Oh.
You know, which just wasn't available in feminism.
Okay. I'm going to need to take a 1-minute break. So I'm going to pause record and I will be back. Just a second.
This bloody fly. I want to...
Yeah, I noticed it a few times.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's quite a quick one though. I can't do it now because it's by my glass.
Well...
Just let it drown in your drink.
I'm drinking my drink.
I've got to say, I can relate to a lot of what you've both said. It's interesting that both of you seem to have reacted against feminism because it didn't fit you personally. And that led you more towards what MRAs are saying about the dynamic between the sexes. Obviously, I came at it from a male point of view, and found out I was the problem. Like you, I was involved with the CND in the 80s and building stages and running cables. And I wanted to go down to Greenham Common. Yeah. And they said, you're not allowed.
I tell this story to you on the last time on radio. Go on, tell her the story. She might recognise it because I told it to someone recently.
Okay, so I was working with CND.
I love this story.
For the CND in Hyde Park. I did a big rally in Hyde Park when Anita Roddick was a big name. She used to run a cosmetics company, free from animal testing and all this kind of thing.
Body Shop.
That's the one, the Body Shop. So I was building a stage for her, and I started, you know, meeting various people from the CND, and I got told about Greenham Common, and there was a peace camp there, and they were having trouble with communications, and they were having trouble with water supply. And I said, well, okay, I'll go down there and help them sort out their comms and their water. And they said, oh, no, you can't. Why not? Well, because you're a man and men caused war. So you're the problem that they're protesting. And I thought, well, this is, that was really quite bizarre as far as I was concerned. And then there were a group of women, I think they were lesbian separatists, and they had like Hell's Angels badges on their backs of their leather jackets, angry women, revolting women, that's right, WIMMIN. And they were marching around, spitting at men, going, no men, men of war. And this was a revelation to me, and this was a bit 1982, I think, before I did any academic stuff. And I just find this really, really odd and puzzling, and it felt like a massive rejection, really, because I wanted to work quite hard with the CND and on those issues. And then later on, like 2015, much later, I worked for the Green Party as a press officer for the 2015 election, and found a very similar thing, although I was much more educated by then. And I was concerned about the environment, but they had a policy of women-only shortlists, and if a woman didn't put herself forward as a candidate for a seat, they'd have to rerun the nominations until they got one. And it was then being run by that woman from Brighton, whose name I can't remember, Caroline Lucas, and then Natalie took over. And I've met them both, and as soon as I met Caroline Lucas, I thought, no. It was just a real deep instinctive no. And it turned out the Green Party, as far as I'm concerned, was run by radical feminists and neo-Marxists. But they just don't see themselves that way. They are so far out to the left that people just can't bring themselves to vote for them. And I think it's a real tragedy for the environment that they've taken the view that it's masculine competitiveness and that capitalism is an expression of masculine dominance, and both of those are destroying the planet. And if the planet was run by women, everything would be okay. And I just thought, this is insane.
Well,
absolutely insane.
I went to a feminist conference called Philia in maybe 2016, and I went undercover and just took it all in. And then the final talk I went to was about women and the environment. And they just went on and on and on about how the environment would be fucking awesome and perfect if only men were not there.
Of course, because we'd have no technology. We wouldn't have cars.
We'd be living in mud huts. The environment would be perfect.
Yeah. Well, that's Camille Parlia's line, isn't it? If civilization had been left to women, you'd still be living in grass houses.
But I could not keep my tongue any longer.
Oh, imagine my shock.
Well, I mean, in fairness to me, I kept my mouth shut all day.
Yeah.
But I couldn't do it any longer. And I said something about, like, do you not think that the fact that women make 70% of consumer purchases has anything to do with the degradation of the environment, or something like that? And one of the women on the panel said, like, that's a really brave question. Well done for asking that. And then she said, the problem is that men advertise to women and convince women that they need things. Because women can't make up their own mind.
They have no needs unless men tell them they have one.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
According to feminism, women have no agency.
Yeah, I'd never got my head around that one at all. Especially if you look at
so feminist.
Retail.
It's too feminist. It's too empowered for you. You're just too misogynistic. And so you think that women have some control over their own needs and wants
and decisions.
You misogynist, you.
Well, yes. I mean, that was my big
white man. You cis hetero patriarch.
Absolutely. You can tick all the hate boxes. That was my debate when you talked about models of power or definitions of power. That was my big struggle at university with my feminist tutor there, because I was talking about she was teaching developmental biology, developmental psychology, child psychology, and, modeling and the influence of parents and all this kind of thing. And I said, well, isn't that a form of power? You're shaping human beings. Isn't that immensely powerful? And it was just dismissed as not important because 490 of the 500 biggest companies are run by men. So the fact that all of those men have been raised by women and trained how to be a human very largely in the first 7 years by women was written off as irrelevant. And I was just absolutely gobsmacked at the way that they would select out areas of human experience that didn't fit the narrative. And one experiment that she was running with another friend of hers, or one study, was the effect of single parent families on mothers and children, and whether it was good for children. And obviously they concluded, being feminists, that there was no problem for the children at all. And I said, what were the outcomes for the men? And they said, well, why is that relevant? It was just like a non-question. What were the outcomes for the men separated from those single parent families?
In fairness, I think probably most separated fathers, if they were, told and convinced that it was best or not relevant to their children, whether they were there or not, probably would say, okay. But the fact is that all of the, reliable evidence points to the fact that it's really damaging to children. And actually, regardless of the harm that it causes to children, I think this is why I gravitated to men's rights as much as anything. If you go and dig down and down and down and peel the layers of the onion back, is that I actually had a genuinely deadbeat dad who just didn't want to be involved and was completely welcome to, but decided not to contribute to my upbringing or see me. And I didn't mean until I was 19, but I spent my entire childhood pining after him. And then when I learned from the men's human rights community that there are women who give their children that experience willingly, who force that on them, I was absolutely, utterly disturbed. I was so angry. And, that is something that really motivates me. It's like, this, regardless of outcomes like, mental health problems, physical health problems, problems at school, problems finding a job, problems finding your way out of poverty, all of that. Just the feeling of waking up each day and dreaming of your dad coming and seeing you, like, that hurts, man. And the system should protect children from feeling that horrible feeling, and yet it doesn't.
Yeah, I remember when my son's mum was expecting, I got hold of the National Childbirth Trust Guide to Childbirth. It's the size of a Bible, and there was one page on the role of the father, and that basically said, be supportive and keep out of the way. And that was it. And when I was working in Bristol in 2002, I think it was, the Bristol Royal Infirmary proudly announced their first young fathers worker. And I thought, 2002, And that was the first time the maternity unit had ever had someone there to support dads. And the weight of preference towards mum, I can see that most men would just give up, because you really have to struggle to be seen as half the unit. I think the National Child Blood Trust have moved on a lot, and I think the evidence base has moved on enormously. The same with criminal justice. When I was training, I was told that women got longer sentences than men for the same crime because they'd stepped out of their gender role and were being punished for non-compliance.
I heard that about Moira Hindley once.
Yeah.
She's an outlier.
Yeah, she
It may
is.
be true. I've not looked into her specific case in depth, you know, but certainly, although I would say that there is absolutely a criminal justice bias against men, and men are given longer sentences. But I did once read a radical feminist article, because I do frequent such sites for comparative literature, and it said that women who don't conform to traditional standards of beauty, masculine women, are sentenced more harshly than feminine women. And I haven't looked into it, but I can believe it.
Well, I know from the male side of it that shorter, uglier men get longer sentences than taller, handsome men.
Right? Yeah, it sounds legit to me.
There is definitely a beauty bias, or a bias towards what people admire. And if you look at things like films, you know, there's been a recent debate about disabled villains, like Bond villains have always got some kind of their hands are in gloves, or they've got a dicky eye, or so there's certainly a bias towards people who are symmetrical and tall men and beautiful women, and they do better. In fact, there was some research done about who manages to get into the drama business, and the most powerful factors for men is that they are tall, and for women that they are beautiful, and for both that they live in the London area and they have a relative in the business. So there's no equal opportunities in show business. It's very much. Greta, I've noticed in your talk earlier on, you mentioned that you were raised by your father. Do you think that gave you more sympathy towards men?
Yeah, definitely. I'm very close to my dad to this day. Obviously, I'm an only child too, so I just live with him for a few years before I moved to the UK. And most of my, I just generally find it easier to get on with men. So most of my friends are male. I just find them easier to talk to. I just find I can express myself more freely, whereas with a woman, I just tend to kind of restrict my range of expression a bit more. I just constantly worry that I might say something that offends her or hurts her. So I just feel like I can be more myself when I when I talk to a man. So
that's interesting.
Excluded.
Yeah, well,
yeah.
you're so butch anyway. So. I mean, I talked to Erin Pitts at length on one occasion, and she was suggesting that a lot of the most vocal and vociferous feminists had problems with their fathers. Valerie Solanas and one or two others. Germaine Greer wrote a whole book about her relationship with her father.
Although,
So,
to be fair, that whole book doesn't paint him out to be such a bad guy. It's just that she had difficulty with him.
yeah.
She couldn't relate to him. He didn't abuse her. He didn't hurt her. She just thought he was a bit. She didn't get him.
What was the relationship like?
Not awful, like slightly frosty. from memory. It's been a few years since I've read that.
Yeah, one of the things that's fascinated me, and again from what Greta was saying about the biological aspect of it, was that when women judge men, they judge them from a female standpoint, and a lot of the criticisms of men could be translated in, well, they're not very good women. And I've heard the flip side of that from MRAs who criticize the female approach to things. Well, they don't do things like we do, which I
Which
think.
MRAs?
Sorry,
Which MRAs?
I'm not going to name names, but there's some of the people.
Okay, well, what exactly did they say?
I'll give you an example. We were having a discussion about vets, and one of the MRAs I was with was saying they're having trouble recruiting vets to work on farm animals and get up in the middle of the night and stick their arm up the back end of a cow and this kind of thing, because most of the women who go into veterinary studies want to work with cats and rabbits and small animals, and they don't want to do the unsociable hours. And the farmers are now finding this is a problem. And it's not exactly explicit, but there was definitely a sense that the men were disparaging of the female vets because they wouldn't sacrifice as much to the business as they believed that men would.
Yeah, and I can believe that, but you know, the women may well be, you know, have better work-life balances. They might die later because of that. They might, you know, we have different priorities, not individually, but as trends. You know, more women are less willing to work on sociable hours and stuff like that. And that's fine as long as we are not, and I don't know what the situation is in veterinary science, as long as we're not pushing women into veterinary science by saying, like, here's a grant and here's loads of support, and pushing men out by saying, like, you're an oppressive misogynist, we really don't want you in this university. You know,
No, it's more subtle than that. What's happening is that more women are applying and they're working harder and getting better exam results. So when you pick the top 50 out of 100, 70% of them are women. And I think that's happening a lot in universities where, in terms of psychological differences, it could well be that women are both more agreeable and more conscientious. And so they don't cause so much trouble and disagree with lecturers. They're more likable and they tend to do more homework throughout the whole course, whereas men tend to leave it to the last minute and cram it. And the results, if you look at exam results,
and be totally willing to muck in when the shit hits fan in the actual job.
Yeah. So again, this goes back to this idea that if there are differences in outcome, the more, certainly one of the things that Jordan Peterson's been very strong on is that's down to different proclivities and choices and not down to some kind of gender bias sorting hat that says, right, you lot engineers and you lot nurses, that this is actually an innate difference. Now, that was very different from my education, where any difference was down to power.
No, you're wrong. Any difference that can feasibly appear to disadvantage women is down to power. Any difference that feasibly can be interpreted to disadvantage men is down to men's innate inferiority.
Okay. I'm not going to be trolled when I'm recording.
I've had a few.
Where is all this going? I mean, we've had things like the red pill, and there's been a lot of books written by men. And there is, I think, one of the most gratifying things for me for making the transition from the left to the centre, certainly leaving the Green Party and getting involved with the red pill, was meeting a lot of male positive women. That was quite enlightening, because most of the women I'd worked with in health and social care had been feminist, not necessarily overtly anti-men, but there was a definite bias. And I'm quite interested in this phenomenon that now, Liz, you're running Justice for Men and Boys, and Aurora, you're doing male positive videos. You know, I know Natty and I'm sorry, the Brown, what's her name, Brown?
Belinda.
Belinda, the conservative woman. You know, I've done Q&As with her. There does seem to be quite a lot of women now speaking up for men. And I mentioned Anna Machin, who's an anthropologist, and she's been doing some very positive stuff about the role of fatherhood and its contribution to child development and biology of fatherhood, and how being a father affects men. And believe it or not, they actually evolved to be fathers. Well, there's a shock. So it's really good to see that out and about. I'm wondering where you think this is all going to go. I mean, you studied politics, Greta, and you predicted Trump. And he's the first American president who said things are dangerous for men.
Shall I make my point? Okay, I mean, you know, at the end of the day, I have hope. And, you know, a significant proportion of my hope rests on the work of women. Because although I think that if you were to really harshly and rationally dissect the value of the work that men are doing compared to the work of women, the men are doing more valuable work. The women are absolutely vital, because we have these things I call vagina phones, which is a portmanteau of megaphone and vagina. And so we need to signal boost the excellent work that men are doing, because we have an authority in this debate that men are simply denied by virtue of having a penis.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think
which makes me sick. But yeah, and I have hope, and I couldn't, you know, I work, and I have hope so that I can get up every morning, but I'm not convinced that we can rescue this situation. And we were talking earlier about politics more generally, and I think I can speak for both of us when I say that we're both scared that our civilization is dying.
We've seen this before. That's the most depressing about the situation, that there's nothing new about it. And
no.
It was done in a very similar way in the Soviet Union, in China. If you watched my interview with Paul Elan, we talked about it for quite a while. And yeah, we were just talking about it earlier with Elizabeth, that, you know, why can't it be a new ideology at least for a change? Why do we have to
why
keep
can't
going
it be
back?
a new cancerous ideology?
Well, yeah.
Are you referring to where I think you said with Paul, you were discussing the idea that if you want to break down the social structure, you need to undermine the family, and to do that, you remove the men? Because this is a big issue in American left-wing politics and fatherlessness among the Black community. It's a massive issue.
It's growing throughout society. I think fatherlessness in white families is the same as it used to be in Black families in the 70s or something like this. So they're catching up, you know. They're just a bit behind, but we see the trend to towards fatherlessness, and it is a big problem. And I do believe it's a symptom of the underlying problem, and then it becomes a vicious circle, because the more children are growing up without fathers, the more grand this ideology is gonna gain, because the boys are not gonna have a male role model, and then the girls are gonna have issues relating to men, and it's just both genders are just gonna be confused about their roles, the meaning in their lives.
So you say it's a symptom of the underlying problem, and the underlying problem being what? Cultural Marxism?
Yeah. So is this pathological idea that we have to empower the sexes, but we do so according to this prescription and this prescription only. And if you don't act according to, this prescription, then you're doing the wrong thing. So yeah, that really is a big problem, because again, we talked about it with Paul, that I'm a classical liberal, and I do very strongly believe in liberal Enlightenment values, and I think they would have got us there eventually.
Mm-hmm.
We would have,
Mm-hmm.
just by treating everyone as individuals. This was one of the most genius ideas of the West, of Western philosophy, that we actually have to treat people as individuals and let them discover themselves and express and just liberate everyone to be who they want to be. And unfortunately, as a regressive ideology, feminism and Marxism is going against it, because they're very dogmatic belief systems, and they're just very convinced that the exact path they outline is the right one and is the only right one.
Yeah, for me, a lot of this pivots around the attempt at equality, and what does equality look like when it's finished? Because you've got, from my point of view and from the biological determinist point of view, women are different. So how do you make two halves of a species that are fundamentally different equal? I said to a friend of mine, men and women will never be equal until men have half the babies and women do half the dying at work and in conflict. And that's never going to happen. So what does equality look like that's fair to both? I think that's a big conundrum.
I think that's a really good question. And one of my, favorite videos is a video I did years ago on my channel called What Will Equality Look Like?
Mm-hmm.
And I outline exactly what I think equality will look like. And it's equality before the law, equality of opportunity, essentially. But actually, have you ever tried asking a feminist what equality will look like? Because the only one I've ever heard give a clear answer was Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And she said it's when the entire Supreme Court is women.
Yeah, I can see a lot of people who'd think that would represent equality. Certainly when I worked in charity, in a big charity that was packed with women, it was a charity originally set up to help rehabilitate prisoners, 90% of whom are men, but the board of directors was all female apart from the finance director. And obviously he had the biggest headache because he had to fund everything. And the line given to me by my boss's boss was, we have to make it like this to correct the balance, because things had got out of kilter where men ran everything. And my argument was, yeah, but those men are dead now, so you're basically excluding their grandchildren on the basis of 150-year-old grievances, and they had no problem with that. There's no problem with that at all. That's fine. So what are your plans for the future?
Well, I'm planning to continue creating content I also really like making more long form videos and short films. I've been experimenting with different editing styles and filming styles. So maybe something a bit more creative. But yeah, I'm very determined to keep up the fight against feminist craziness, and whatever I can do in support of men's rights too, I'm very happy to do. And I'm hoping to collaborate with Elizabeth on projects in the future. And
I don't think that'll happen. No, it will. We've got various projects actually in the pipeline, but they're all shh. But I did, spoiler alert, everyone tonight, that I will be running for the London Assembly in 2024. I wanted to do it in 2020, then COVID happened. Then I wanted to do it in 2021, and then life happened. But 2024, I'll bloody do it.
And is that running as J4MB?
Yes.
And what plans have you got for J4MB, or is it all hush hush?
No, I mean, you know, we've got a new website that should have been published 3 days ago, but we've had some technical issues. And I'm writing a new manifesto. And my plans for J4MB are to inject my personality into it, and I'm hoping that my personality will attract some attention, and I'm hoping my vagina phone will amplify my voice, and I'll be able to represent our supporters.
Okay, great. Well, thanks very much for your time. It's been a giggle.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, good luck with your long form and with J4MB. I keep looking down at the two little pictures, and it's, of course, you're both up there, really. But no, I really appreciate it, because you've been on air all night, haven't you?
Yeah, and we're on air all tomorrow morning, and afternoon.
Wow.
We're workhorses.
Oh, good for you. Good for you. All right, I'm going to stop. I've stopped recording now. You can do what you like. That was great. Thanks for that. It's lovely to meet you, Greta. I know this one from past misdemeanors. I'm sorry I couldn't come up, but I've had this cold all week. My eyes are still puffy.
Yeah, I did invite Richard up, and he cancelled on me.
It was raining, and there's a virus.
It was raining, so we didn't come.
Well, I didn't want to go on a train, and I didn't want to go on a motorcycle, so those were my choices. But we'll do this again. Who else do you think I might be useful to talk to?
What birds?
Yeah, I'm trying to get hold of Ava Brighton, but I've had no luck there so far.
Oh, I can help you with that. When are you going to put this video out?
When I've learned how to edit.
Well, people will be more willing to talk to you once they've seen that you're a good interviewer.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
It's getting the first one or two going. I'm trying to get better.
You don't need to do a lot of editing. What?
I know, we were perfect the whole way through.
You were, of course you were. There was no drunkenness and swearing at all.
You never said swearing wasn't allowed.
I know. I should know. You should know as a genteel lady.
Encouraged her to swear.
I felt it.
I never swear, so.
Well, good for you.
Lady.
Yeah. I'm going to try and talk to Cassie as well, because obviously I've worked with her before.
Yeah.
But she's been on a completely different project. And I was going to hope to talk to her retrospectively about how getting involved with all this had impacted her. And Janice, who I've talked to before, because I think she's great.
Oh, lovely.
But we'll see. We'll see. Yeah, no, she's great. I like Janice.
What about Natty?
Yeah, I'm ambivalent I find her quite aggressive.
Okay. What about Lisa Chamberlain?
Lisa, yeah, I used to be Facebook friends with her, so I could try Lisa. I'll write that down.
I mean, Lisa and Craig spend their time talking men off the edge from suicide because they're not seeing their kids. So I think that could be a really powerful interview if because you're particularly good at drawing people out. I think you are very warm and you can talk to people well, because Lisa's quite shy.
Okay.
Which is why she doesn't do many interviews.
Okay.
There's also Tom's harem, so Alison Bushell, Sonia Shaljean,
and Anna Mackin is definitely someone I want to talk to. I've sent you a link to her video, and she's done a TED talk, which is much the same. Because I'm very interested in how she defines herself as a feminist, in the context of being so positive about fathers, because that's quite, in my experience, that's quite a rare combination. So I'm going to contact her again. But I'll
Erin.
Sorry?
Are you going to talk to Erin?
I'll try.
Okay, I might be able to help you there.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent a lot of time with Erin. I don't know where she's back in Wimbledon now?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. And if I can get cut together
he is doing a Zoom with me and William Collins on the something or other of something.
That's really specific. Thanks for
October. Sometime in October. So, no, but my point is she can navigate Zoom.
Great. Okay. Okay, well, I'm going to go away and just have a Da Vinci and see if I can learn how to use it. But thanks very much for your time, and I will come and see you, and we'll go out and have a pizza.
Well, you know, I mean, I tend to doubt it because we're a rainy country. I've got zero faith in you now.
I've got a car now.
Have you? Is it all good?
No, but it will be. It will be.
Are you in Devon?
Yeah, I'm right down in South Devon.
You should drive up, collect me, and bring me down to Devon because it's God's own country.
Yeah, we could visit in Devon. I love Devon.
I love Devon.
Well, you're very welcome. There's loads of places to stay at this time of year, and you can stay here if you can cope with it. But yeah, you know, you're very welcome to come down. It's I used to live in London, and I would never go back after living here.
Oh yeah, but you haven't seen my place. It's like, what's my place like? Where I live.
It's like,
I know, I've seen the pictures.
It's like a fairy tale.
I've seen the pictures.
There's a forest next door. There's a field out of my living room window.
It doesn't feel like being in London.
It does not feel like.
And I live in Camden, so I'm very central.
I lived over the top of a second-hand car showroom in East Dulwich. So.
Oh, that's near Belinda.
Yeah, that's right, around the corner. And I used to just opposite Brockwell Park. So that was nice. But I got paranoid in London. That was largely due to working in the West End and living on coke and coffee. So that's why I ran screaming from London. But I will come up and see you. I do promise it will happen, honestly. Even if I do have to come on a train with a bag over my head.
You need a card. Greta's got a card.
A card?
I'm exempt from wearing a mask.
Oh, yeah, okay.
You can
okay, well, I could get one. I could get one. I think I'd rather wear one.
£7 is definitely worth it.
But you can also make your own, but I got it from eBay. Oh, you're gonna see it in reverse, but
okay, yeah, I could make one of those. All right, darlings. Well, thanks for your time. And watch that Anna Mackin thing. I think it would be really good if you could get to talk to her.
Yeah, but we're watching Robin Hardy's 1973 The Wicker Man now.
Yeah, good. All right, yeah. Horrible, but there you go.
But beautiful.
All right. Yeah, I'm not a big horror film fan.
It's not a fucking horror film.
Okay, maybe
I can't watch horror
I've had
films.
a few. I've had a few.
I know. You were already, you were
worse.
drunk when we started.
I know. Really good.
You're wild enough when you're sober. Don't flutter your eyelids either. It doesn't work for you. All right. Well, lovely to meet you, and nice to talk to you again. And I will see you soon. All right. Bye for now.
Good night. I'll send you the recording.
Yeah, great. I'll send you mine. If it's probably just the same, but yeah. All right. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.